Muse for you, awesome websites without code.
Hey, what's up Musers? John with Muse for You, here to help you build awesome websites without code, and welcome to the weekly update for the week of April 16th through April 22nd. So this week I've released a template and a widget. This video tutorial today will be mostly on the widget, as I want to showcase how to use it and the different features of the widget. But first I'll showcase both the widget and the template, and then we'll get into using the widget. So the first thing I'll showcase here is the widget, which is called the SVG Shape Animator. And it's a really great and powerful widget. I call it the Adobe Illustrator companion because you can create shapes right in Adobe Illustrator and then draw them in Adobe Muse. And you can draw shapes in a sequence. So out of one shape, you can copy and paste in Adobe Muse, change the size, and then have all the shapes draw one after another. And I'll showcase how to do that in this video tutorial. So here we have the preview page for the widget. And if I click on example 1, we see everything draws. So you can draw text, shapes, and Adobe Illustrator has like a whole section of these really interesting shapes that you can also draw. And we'll go over that in this tutorial. So here's the first example. We see it says Muse for You, the circles draw, the lines draw, the crosses here draw, and the X's, and it looks really good. I really like this effect. And then we have example 2. This is a grid, and Adobe Illustrator has a grid shape that you can create a grid with a few clicks, and then you can drop it into Adobe Muse. And with the widget, you can have this really interesting grid animation. All right, so those are the two examples. And then I'll go back to the shop and I'll showcase the template really quick, and then we'll get into working with the widget. So the template released this week is called the Interior Designer Portfolio Template, and I'll go ahead and preview. And here we have the home page. So here we can see it says form meets function. We're actually using the swiper.js slideshow for these different images, so the images move and creates this kind of interesting panel effect, which I really like. And I'll go to case studies, and we have the different case studies here. Here we're using the smooth text reveal hoverbox widget, and if you click on any of these images, it goes to a case study, and we're using the swiper.js slideshow here to go through the images. So it's a really functional website. If you're an interior designer, you can really showcase your work in a really nice way. We have a Google map here, so the users know where you're located and things like that. All right, and then we have the About Us page. So we have these two images here. Again, we're using the Smooth Text Reveal Hoverbox widget. We have some text here, and again, the Google Map, and looks good. And then Contact Us goes to the Google Map here, and we have some contact information. So it's a really functional template. I mean, if you're not an interior designer, you could use it for your own projects, but it looks really nice, especially this home page. It has the different slideshows here, and the images are sliding to create this really interesting effect there. All right, so that is the template, and I'll create a video tutorial this week and go over all the pages within Adobe Muse. All right, looks good, and we have the social media icons here in the upper right. Okay, so that's the Fashion Designer Portfolio template. It is fluid with design. It's responsive for desktop, tablet, and mobile. There's a maximum of 6 breakpoints per page. The pages are organized within the Layers panel. There are 3 main pages: Home, Case Studies, About Us. There's 1 subpage, Sample Details page. There's 1 master page. It's fully customizable. The assets are included, and it's for Adobe Muse 2018 and later. And the widgets used in the template are the Muse Motion widget, the swiper.js slideshow widget, the Smooth Text Reveal Hoverbox widget, the Big Menus widget, the SVG Menus widget. If you weren't concerned about the menu working in IE, you could use the SVG Menus widget, and it has a really cool effect. So you could just swap that out in the Layers panel on the master page and on the home page. Okay, and we have the browser centering widget and the preloader widget. And here's the community section if you have any questions about the template, and a few images of the template here on the left as well. So again, I'll be creating a video tutorial this week on the template, but let's go back to the widget, which I'll be focusing on in this video tutorial. So it's right here, it's the SVG Shape Animator. And I'll just read the features included, and then we'll get into working with it in Adobe Muse. So you can draw any shape created in Adobe Illustrator. You can draw shapes in a sequence. You can set the drawing duration. You can set the sequence duration for drawing shapes in a sequence. You can set the drawing easing. You can set a start delay for the animation. You can change the color of the stroke when drawing. You can change the fill of the shape when drawing. You can draw text. You can loop the animation. You can animate on scroll. And there's the ability to add a play, pause, restart, or reverse button for the animation. So here we have the community section as well, a few of the widget options, and looks good. And then this video tutorial will be right here as well, so you can watch right from the widget page. Okay, and to preview, you can just click on preview, and we have example 1 and example 2. All right, looks good. Okay, so to get access to both the widget and template, you can simply go to museforyousshop.com. And here you can click subscribe today. And here you can click subscribe now to get access to all widgets and templates I come out with for $39 a year. Here we have the SVG shape animator widget. And here you can click add to cart to purchase individually. Or again, you can click subscribe to get access to all widgets and templates I come out with for $39 a year. So I'll go back to the widgets page and the templates. And here we have the interior designer portfolio template. Here you can click add to cart to purchase individually, or again, you can click subscribe to get access to all widgets and templates I come out with for $39 a year. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into working with the widget in Adobe Muse. So here I have a blank site. So the first thing I'm gonna do is go to the library panel. So here we have the library panel. And if you don't see the library panel, you can go to window and click on library. Okay, so I'll open the library panel. And here I'll type in SVG shape, and here we have the widgets. So we have the add first, so you'll want to place that at the top of your Adobe Muse website before beginning. Then we have this SVG shape animator, the simple and the advanced. So we have simple and advanced, and there is a slight difference between them. The advanced allows you to animate the stroke and the fill independent of how the shape draws, and I'll go over that in more detail once we add the shapes. So the first thing I want to do here is place the add first SVG shape animator onto my Adobe Muse website. So I'll click, hold, and drag, place right in there. And then we'll start off with the simple. So I'll just click, hold, and drag, and place right in there. Okay, so if I open the widget options, we have a few sections here. So we have the SVG layer ID, and this is actually really important, and I'll showcase this when we're working in Adobe Illustrator. And then we have the drawing options. We have start delay, duration, sequence delay, easing, elasticity. Elasticity is for elastic easing. You can set the direction. You can say normal, reverse, or alternate, which will play forward and then back. And you want to make sure that loop is enabled for these two. And you can autoplay and set it to on scroll, have the SVG draw on scroll. If you do want it on scroll, you want to make sure autoplay is not enabled, and you can loop the drawing and the animation of the stroke and fill. You can set the fade in opacity and the fade in duration. And here we can see it says if on scroll is enabled, make sure autoplay is not enabled. All right, so then we have the on scroll options right in here. So you can end the animation, restart the animation, or reverse the animation when the SVG goes off the viewport, or when you can't see it. So like if you scroll down and it becomes not visible, what you want it to do when it comes back into view. Okay, and then we have the stroke color animation and the fill animation, and play buttons. All right, and right down here we have creating shape in Adobe Illustrator. There's also a PDF within the widget folder that showcases how to create the shape in Adobe Illustrator. All right, so now let's finally get into creating the shape so we can work with these widget options. So I'll just go into Adobe Illustrator, and here on the left in the Adobe Illustrator toolbar, we have these shapes here. So you have a line segment tool, an arc tool, spiral tool, rectangular grid tool, or polar grid tool. Or you have these shapes here, rectangle tool, rounded rectangle tool, ellipse tool, polygon tool, star tool. The only one that doesn't work is the flare tool. So any of these shapes besides the flare tool. So I'll quickly just create a shape. I'll create a spiral, and I'll just click, and we'll do these options here are fine. And there we have a spiral. It doesn't really matter what size it is because it is an SVG. You can resize it in Adobe Muse and it will not lose quality. Okay, so there we have the shape. The one thing that's like really important when creating the shape is to make sure that it has a stroke. So you can either make sure it has a stroke right up here in the control bar. We see it has a stroke of 1 point and the stroke is black. Or here in the properties section, the property layer, you can change the stroke and you can make it thicker or less thicker. We'll leave it at 1 there. And then I'll click on stroke. And here we have the stroke properties. So you can change the cap of the stroke, the corner. The stroke, you always want to make sure that the stroke is aligned to the center. You don't want it to align to the inside or the outside. You want to make sure that it's aligned to the center. If you find that your SVG is not drawing, it could be because the stroke is aligned to the inside. You do want to make sure that it's aligned to the center. Okay, so that's all we need to do there. So now we want to get the code for the SVG. So here I'm going to go to File, Export. Yeah, so right here, File. I'm going to go to Export, Export As. And here in the Save window, I'm going to go down here where it says Format. We're not actually going to save the SVG. We just want the code. So I'm going to click the drop down right down here, and I'm going to select SVG. So I'll select it. And we don't want to use artboard, so make sure that's not checked. And I'm going to click on Export. Okay, and you can use these properties here. So I have the styling to inline styling, font SVG, images preserve, object IDs, it's layer names, and the decimal is 3 places. So one thing I didn't go over is the layer name. So I'm gonna cancel this here, and let's go to the layers panel within Adobe Illustrator. We notice here that the layer name is layer 1, and that's the layer ID for the SVG, and I'll showcase that when we save it. If you don't see the layers panel, you can go to Window and click on Layers. All right, so let's go ahead and save that again. So I'll go to File, Export, Export As, go to the Format option, select SVG, click on Export, and we have the options here. I do want it to be responsive, so I'll click Responsive, and 3 decimal places is good for the SVG code. And then right here, I'll click on Show Code. So I'll click there, and here we have the code for the spiral. So we can see it starts with SVG, so it is an SVG image, and this is the SVG code we need. So notice right here it says layer 1, and that's the name of the layer, and we can just see it just adds an underscore between the word and the number. So layer underscore 1, and I'll showcase why that's important. So here I'll just copy this code. I'll hit Command C to copy, then I'll go into Muse, and I'll go to Object right up here, Object, Insert HTML. So I'll click there, and here we have the HTML window, so we can add HTML code in here. So that SVG code is actually HTML code as well, so we can just add the code directly to the website. So I'll hit Command V to paste, and there we have the code. We notice the layer ID is layer 1. I'll click OK, and there we have the spiral. So now I can resize this and just make it any size I'd like, and it'll retain its quality because it is code, it is a vector, and it's getting the attributes of this shape via the code, so it won't lose quality. So let's go into the widget now. We can open the widget options, and we can see the SVG layer ID is layer 1. So it's layer underscore 1, which is the same as what's in the code. So right away we have that drawing, so I can go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, and we have that spiral draw. So you might be thinking, well, what's the difference between this and the SVG draw widget? And I'll showcase the difference now. So if I resize this a bit, what I can do with this widget now, and let me change the height there, I can copy and paste this shape multiple times and have these shapes draw in a sequence. So just by copying and pasting, I can go ahead and preview, and we're gonna have 4 shapes draw one after another. So it can create for a really interesting homepage or just really interesting sections on your website where you can have things draw either right away, or you can set it to on scroll and just have these different shapes drawing. So that's what's really exciting about this widget. So if I open the widget options, I can work with the timing. So I can set the duration of the drawing. So I can say like 3 seconds, so it draws a bit slower. And then I can say draw one after the other after 1 second. So one will draw, it'll wait 1 second, then the next one will draw. So I'll go ahead and preview. So this one draws, it takes 3 seconds, 1 second passes, the other ones draw as well. All right, so you can have like a really cool effect or like really graceful animations. It kind of reminds me of like those swimmers that, you know, form lines and create these beautiful shapes. You can have that visual representation on your website by having all these different shapes animating one after another. So I'll go back into the widget. You can change the easing. So we have, you know, multiple easing options. So let's say I were to choose ease in out elastic, and there we go. We'll notice that it kind of bounces. It's a bit slow, so you might not notice the bounce too much, but we can see it's kind of bouncing a bit. And the elasticity option is for the elastic easing. You can choose a number between 0 and 1,000. 1,000 being the most elastic, so it's going to be like really bouncy. So it's going to be like crazy bouncing. It almost has like a jittery effect. So I'll leave it at 500 just so we can see it a bit better. Looks good. We can change the direction. So if I were to say alternate, we can see it says enable loop. So I'll just click on loop, and then it'll draw forward and then draw backwards. So we have the elastic easing, so it kind of has that bounce, and then it'll go backwards. All right, so it's a really, I mean, you can do a lot of really cool things with lines and drawing and, you know, different shapes. It's a lot of fun. So there we have the options. You can set the fade in opacity. I would recommend leaving it at 1. If you did want to fade in, like if you wanted the shapes to fade in, you could set the duration to longer. And then I'll just change the easing. So we're going to notice it's going to fade in, and let me change the duration here a bit. So I'll preview, and you're going to notice it fades in ever so slightly. With different shapes, it'll be noticeable, and if the shapes have a fill, you'll also notice it as well. So let's say we wanted to change the color for the strokes as they're animating. We can just go into the widget options, go to the stroke color animation, and click on enable stroke color animation and select the stroke color. I'll leave it at this color, purple. So I'll preview, and we can see it turns purple as it's drawing. So that's how you change the color for the stroke. These spirals don't have a fill, so the fill option wouldn't work here. You can add play buttons, and I'll showcase that in a second. But let's go ahead and set the on scroll option so we can draw these shapes on scroll. So if you are gonna have them play on scroll, first you want to uncheck autoplay and then check on scroll. Okay, and then I'll just add some scroll height. So we're unchecking autoplay because we don't want the shapes to automatically play. We want them to play once they're visible in the browser. So I'll just bring them down. I'll preview in the browser. I'll scroll down as I'm scrolling. Once they're visible, they start to animate. All right, so it's just that simple. Just uncheck autoplay and check on scroll, and then you can set how you want, bring them down the page, and then they'll draw once they're visible in the browser. So with the on scroll options, you can restart the animation. So every time the user comes back into the browser, the animation restarts. And for the direction, I'm going to say normal, so it doesn't play forward and back. And then I'll preview. So we see it plays. If I go off the page, or if they're not visible and I come back, it plays again. So you can just restart the drawing every time the user comes back to the shape. You can also reverse the animation. So when the user comes off the page, the animation will start playing in reverse, and then will play forward when it comes back. All right, so those are the on scroll options. So let's add a few more shapes just for practice. I'm going to bring them back right up here, and we'll zoom in a bit. All right, and I'll uncheck on scroll, and it looks good, and I'll uncheck loop. All right, so let's add a few more shapes. I'll go back into Adobe Illustrator, and I'll cancel this here, and let's add another shape. Let's just do a square. So I'll just hold down shift to create a square. I can change the stroke here. I'll make the stroke a little bit thicker, so I'll change it to 3 points. Again, I'll make sure that the align stroke is aligned to center, and we'll leave the cap in the corner just like that. Okay, so now I'll go to File, Export as. I'll go to SVG, Export. I want it to be responsive. Click on show code, and I'll copy this here and go to object, insert HTML in Adobe Muse, paste, and click OK. So because this has the layer ID, layer 1 as well, it will draw with the rest of these shapes. So I can copy and paste and just have a few more shapes here. All right. So something like this. You can just get really creative with, the different shapes and things like that. All right. So it's just that simple, just creating the shapes and adding to Illustrator or to Adobe Muse. So I can copy this widget and I can change the layer ID, let's say to layer 2. And I can go into this square here and just write in the code, just change it to layer 2. For rectangles, I could even change the stroke. So right in the code, we see it says stroke width. If I wanted it to be thicker, I could say something like 5, and it'll change the stroke width, so it's thicker. So you can change that right in the code of the SVG. And I'll just delete these, I'll copy and paste, and there we go. So there we have it, and I'll go in here. I can change all the properties now to give these shapes, the squares, a different animation. So we can change the stroke color, so I'll give it a different stroke color, and looks good. So if I preview, and we can change the timing. Actually, let me do that here. I'll make it 1 second, so a bit faster, and I'll have them draw quicker. So I'll preview. So we can see the squares drew independently of the spirals, and that was simply by changing the layer ID within the code. So we changed it to layer 2, and then within the widget, we changed it to layer 2 as well. So now we can apply individual properties to the squares. So the spirals and the squares have their own timing and different options there. Okay, so let's say you wanted to draw text. So I'll go into Adobe Illustrator and I'll just create some text. I'll select the type tool and I'll click. Oops, let me try that again. So I'll select the type tool, click, and I'll say SVG shape animator. I'll highlight it, I'll style the text a bit, and we'll do something like this. And we'll resize it. So when working with text, what you want to do here is you want to right click and select create outlines after the text is created. Then you can change the fill and the stroke. So for the fill, I'll just say white, and the stroke, I'll give it a stroke of 1. So I did that right up here, or you can do it in the properties for the text. Okay, so that's all you have to do. Just remember to right click, say create outlines, give it a fill and a stroke. The fill can be transparent. Okay, so now I'll go to File, Export, Export As, go to SVG, click Export, Responsive, Show Code, copy the code, go back in here. I'm just going to hide all of these, go to Object, Insert HTML, paste, and click OK. So there we go. Looks good. Let me make it a little bit bigger. And perfect. So there we have the text. So if I go to edit HTML, the layer ID is layer 1. So it's going to use the widget with the layer 1 ID here. So I'll go ahead and preview. And just like that, we have the shape drawing. Looks good. So because this text does have a fill, we can change the fill of the text. So I'll go ahead and showcase that. And let me just close this here. So we can see it plays one after another. So let me go in here. So we can set a fill animation. So I can select enable fill animation. And then we have stroke animation. For the stroke, we'll change it to a different color. And we'll change the sequence delay to be a bit quicker, so 250 milliseconds. And we'll change the easing to ease and out sign. And I'll preview. And there we have this really interesting animation. It draws the text one after another and looks good. So I can actually, let me disable the stroke animation. Let's see how that looks. So it just draws, and then we have that fill. Looks good. All right, so that's how you draw text. Just remember to right click and create outlines in Illustrator. And if you want to fill, you can add a fill. And if you want a stroke, you can add a stroke as well. Okay, so I'll quickly showcase while I have this text here. I'll showcase using the advanced widget and what we can do with it. So I'll open up the library panel and I'll type in SVG shape, and I'll bring in the SVG shape animator advanced. So I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. The only difference with the advanced is that the fill animation and the stroke animation now have their own timing. So you can time the fill and the shape independently of how the SVG draws. So for example, if I wanted a specific color initially, let's say I had a stroke color in Adobe Illustrator and I wanted it to be different in Muse, all I could do here is select enable stroke color, and then for the sequence delay, I can say 0, and the duration I can say 0. So make them both 0, and then the stroke will initially be that color. So I'll go ahead and preview, and right away the stroke is that color. It's changed right in Adobe Muse. Because there's no timing, because the timing is set to 0, the stroke just initially becomes that color. So I'll go back here. We say stroke color, I can change the stroke color pretty much to anything I'd like. All right, so just like that, we've changed the stroke color with the advanced widget. So it just gives you more control of how you want the fill or the stroke to change color, and it's independent of the timing of the stroke drawing. All right, so that's the advanced. One other thing I'll show, let's say in Adobe Illustrator, if you had, you wanted to create your shape layout in Adobe Illustrator, you could just have a bunch of different shapes, just like this. You would want to make sure that the width and height is to your liking because they're going to be relative to each other. So I'm just drawing a bunch of shapes here, and something like this, and like this. Yeah, so I just have a bunch of shapes here. Okay, we'll do something like this. So you can just create like a masterpiece of different shapes and things like that to showcase on your website, and you can have them all draw one after another. So there are all my shapes, and looks good. So now I can just go to File, Export, Export As. Same thing, SVG, Export, Responsive, Show Code. I'll copy this code here, and I'll just hide this for the moment. Go to Object, Insert HTML. I'll paste that right in there. And there we have the shapes. I'll resize to make it a little bit larger. And I'll go ahead and preview. So I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser. And we notice that the shapes draw one after another. So it's basically the same as copying and pasting in Muse, or if you wanted to add them one by one, it would be the same thing. But you could just create your illustration in Illustrator, copy and paste, and the shapes would draw one after another. All right, one thing I didn't go over actually, and let me go back into my layers panel and bring in some of these shapes. If you wanted certain shapes to animate together, you could just group them. So if I hold down Shift and select all the spirals, and then I hit Command G or right click and group, we're going to notice that the spirals animate first and then the squares. So I'll go ahead and preview in the browser. And actually, because the squares have, let me just change the layer number here to layer 1. So I know I'm covering a lot. If you have any questions, let me know. But I did want to cover all of this just to showcase how much you can do with this widget. So let me right click and do like this. Okay, so we have the spirals. So the spirals will play first, and then the squares. So I'll go ahead and preview. So we can see all the spirals play, and then the squares come in. So that's all simply by grouping certain shapes together, and then you can have them play in a sequence. If they weren't grouped, the spirals and the squares would play one after another. So I just ungrouped them, and we notice they all play together. But if I select all the spirals, right click and group, the spirals will play first, and then the squares. All right, so it's just, grouping can be a really great function. So you can have certain shapes animate in sequence, and you can change the properties within the widget options. If you wanted all the shapes to animate right away, you could just set the sequence delay to 0. I mean, now they'll all play, even the squares will play right away because there's no sequence delay. But you could have a different widget for the squares and have, let's say you wanted all the spirals to come in together, just set the sequence delay to 0. And then you could have either a start delay to the squares or a sequence delay for the squares. Okay, so yeah, I know I'm covering kind of a lot of information, but there is a lot to this widget, so I just wanted to go over it. All right, looks good. So I think I've covered mostly everything with the widget besides the play button. If you did want the shapes to play, I'm going to bring back the text because I think that's a better example. So let me go into the layers and I'll bring back the text right in here. And if you did want to have play buttons, you'll just want to create an element in Adobe Muse, or you can add an image. So you can have an element, and then here within the widget options, we have the play button section. So we have play button, pause button, restart button, or reverse button. If you do have the play button enabled, you do want to make sure that there's an element with the graphic style name that's set here. So we have it set to play. So here I'll click on the element, go to the graphic styles panel. If you don't see the graphic styles panel, you can go to window and click graphic styles. I'll click on this icon here that looks like a piece of paper with a folded corner, creates a new style. I'll double click and I'll rename this to play. Okay, and then I'll create another element and we'll give it a color. And I'll give this the graphic style name pause. So within the widget, I'll go to the play button section and I'll enable the play and pause. And we notice the graphic style name is play and the graphic style name is pause. And those are the graphic style names we applied to these elements here. So I'll go ahead and preview. So I can pause it, play it, pause, play, pause. So if you want the user to have control over how the shapes draw, you can just add these buttons. So I'll add the restart and reverse buttons as well, just so we can have all the buttons there. So I'll just change the graphic style name here for this one to restart and this one to reverse. Okay, and then I'll enable the play buttons right in here, and that's it. So I'll go ahead and preview. So I can pause it, restart, reverse, restart, reverse, play. Looks good. Pause, play, restart, and reverse. If you do have these buttons, you might want to write those within the buttons so the user knows what they're working with. All right, so that's it. If you want the user to have control over the way the shapes draw, you can add the play buttons within Adobe Muse and assign the graphic style names that are for the play buttons to the elements to have them act as pause and play buttons. Okay, looks good. So the last thing I'll do just for fun is we'll create a grid. So here in Adobe Illustrator, we have this rectangular grid tool. So I can select it here and then I can click, and here you can change the number of horizontal dividers, the number of vertical dividers, and the width and height. I'll go ahead and click OK. And there we have the grid. Looks good. It has a stroke of 1 and the stroke color is black. All right, so there we have the grid. I can go to File, Export, Export As, go to SVG, click on Export. I do want it to be responsive. I can click Show Code and I can copy that code here. I'll hide this here in this breakpoint. I'll go to Object, Insert HTML, and paste that code in there. And there we have the grid. So let me move this down like so, and I'll resize. And there we have it. So let me just align it to the center. And looks good. And I'll align this to the center as well. Okay, so I'll go ahead and File, Preview Page in Browser. And we have this really nice stroke animation, or grid animation. I can restart it because I have the play and pause buttons, reverse it, restart, reverse. Looks good. Pause it, play it, restart, and perfect. So this widget is a lot of fun. There is a lot you can do with it. You can work with any of the shapes in Adobe Illustrator. So we have the line segment tool, the arc tool, the spiral tool, rectangular grid tool, the polar grid tool. That's a cool effect actually. And we have the rectangle tool, rounded rectangle tool, ellipse tool, polygon tool, and star tool. The flare tool won't work with the drawing here. Okay, so that's basically it. In the widget, you can change all the timing for the drawing. You can set the direction, you can autoplay, you can have it play on scroll, you can loop it, you can set the fade in opacity and the fade in duration. The very important part here is making sure that the layer ID is the same. That the layer ID here is the same as the layer ID for the SVG. So to find that out, you can right click, select edit HTML, and it'll be the first thing here. SVG ID is layer_1. So that has to be the ID within the widget. All right, and you can change it right in the code, and then you would have to change it within the widget. So if you wanted different options for different shapes, you can just change the IDs and give them different options. So here we have the on scroll options. You can have a stroke color animation. For the advanced widget, you can set independent timing for the stroke and fill. For the simple, the timing will be the same as the drawing of the shape. Okay, so we have stroke color animation, fill animation, and we have play buttons as well. And here it says creating shape in Adobe Illustrator. So this outlines everything I just talked about, creating the shape in Adobe Illustrator, then exporting it, going to export as, changing the format option to SVG, then exporting the code, and then showing the code, copying the code, and then pasting the code by going to Object, Insert HTML in Adobe Muse, pasting the code, and then you can resize the SVG within Adobe Muse and set the widget options. You can also group SVGs to have them animate in a sequence. All right, so that's basically it. For the SVG shape animator, you do want to make sure the add first is at the top as well. But yeah, that's basically it. I know it's a fairly long video, but I just feel that there's a lot you can do with this widget, so I wanted to cover all the different aspects of it. So that's it for this video tutorial. To get access to the SVG shape animator widget, you can go to Muse for You shop, and let me close some windows actually right up here. Let me go right back up here. You can go to museforyoushop.com, and here you can click subscribe today, and here you can click subscribe now to get access to all widgets and templates I come out with for $39 a year. The SVG shape animator is right here, and here you can click add to cart to purchase individually, or again you can click subscribe to get access to all widgets and templates I come out with for $39 a year. Here are the features included, a few of the widget options, and the preview page, so you can see the different examples there. And we have the grid example here as well, and it looks good. All right, so that's it for the tutorial. The video will be right here as well, so you can watch this video right from the widget page. And I will be creating a video tutorial on the interior designer portfolio template this week as well. So that's it for this video tutorial. Again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. If you like this video tutorial, you can subscribe below. Also in the show more section below are links to other resources and links to museforyoushop.com. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.
Muse for You, awesome websites without code.